This is Matthew Cratter from Trader University, and today I want to talk about a disastrous new tax rule that is in the works. Hopefully it's not going to pass, but it's very important that you understand what it is and how it might affect you and your family. To begin with, I want to say that this is not tax advice. This video is not investment advice. Be sure to consult with a tax professional or an investment advisor before making any decisions. This is the Wyden proposed tax. Senator Ron Wyden from Oregon has proposed a tax that will tax unrealized capital gains. And if you don't know what that is, I'm going to go over it very quickly. A realized cap gains is when you buy and sell a stock and you realize a profit in it. So you buy a stock for $100 a share, you sell it for $150 a share, you owe taxes on that $50 profit. And the amount will of course depend on your total income, as well as how many shares you owned of it. But this is a realized capital gains tax. This is how things work today. An unrealized capital gains tax, which the senator wants, it would work this way. You buy a stock for $100, you don't sell it because you're going to hold it for retirement in a long-term investment account. You decide to keep it for many years. Under an unrealized capital gains tax regime, if it's trading at 150, you bought it for 100. If it's trading at 150 when the market closes on December 31st, these are normally done as year-end adjustments, you would owe taxes on that paper profit of $50. This would be an unrealized capital gains tax. It's unrealized because you didn't actually sell the stock, you just continue to hold it. So there are a lot of problems with this. There are a lot of practical problems, and these are one reason I think that this probably will not pass. But there still is a chance that something like this does get pushed through in the next couple of years as the U.S. government gets more and more desperate for funding. So what are the possible problems? Well, if you have a $50 capital gains, it's unrealized capital gains. Let's say they apply the normal sort of 20% capital gains tax to that. That's $10. And of course, if you own 1,000 shares or 10,000 shares, we're talking much larger amounts of money. I'm just doing it with one share. So you owe $10. Now, where do you come up with that $10 to pay the annual tax? Let's pretend it's $10,000 to make it a little bit more meaningful. On the margin, a lot of people are going to be forced to sell down this position, even though they don't want to. They want to keep it for the long term, but they're going to need to sell a few shares of stock to pay that unrealized cap gains tax. And this, if a lot of people do this, this could lead to downward pressure on the stock market as people sell a little bit of stocks to pay their tax bill every April in the US. Now let's say it's a family farm instead, because capital gains taxes apply to real estate as well as stocks and other assets. So let's say your father paid $1 million for the farm 20 years ago, and it's now worth $3 million. It returns $150,000 per year in profits. Farming is a pretty low margin business. Under an unrealized capital gains tax, your father is going to owe at least $400,000. So basically the difference between 1 million and 3 million times 20%, that gets you $400,000. If this tax is passed, your father would need to come up with $400,000 this coming April. And this is in a family that only makes $150,000 per year in profits from the farm. So it's almost 3 years worth of profits. In this situation, you are probably not going to end up inheriting the family farm, and the farm is going to be sold to a big agribusiness instead. So where would your father come up with this $400,000? He would need to sell the whole farm or sell off some acreage, carve off some acreage to pay for that. So this is how this can affect real families and real people. Another problem is just the problem of valuation. How do you value the farm at $3 million? Who gets to decide this valuation? There'll obviously be a lot of games played with this. People will try to underestimate the value of the farm. But the basic point is that it can be extremely difficult to value in a fair way illiquid assets that don't trade on a daily basis. We always know what Apple stock is worth because it trades almost 24 hours a day if you look globally, but certainly trades 8 or 9 hours in the US. But farms and other real estate, even the value of your house, there's probably a fairly wide range for it. You don't know the exact value because it's an illiquid asset. I happen to know a few family farmers, and they are land rich. They may own millions of dollars worth of farmland, but they don't live the lives of the rich because their income is so low. And even that income, a lot of it needs to be reinvested in the farm. So you might look heroic as a politician trying to tax someone who on paper appears to have a net worth of like $3 million, but they're also driving a 20-year-old car, and they're certainly not living the lives of the rich. The unrealized capital gains tax would also apply to you and me as homeowners unless they carve out an exemption. And maybe they carve out an exemption at, let's say, if your home is worth $400,000 or $500,000 or less. But even a rule like this, it's very difficult to decide the cutoff simply because different parts of the U.S. have different costs of living. This was actually the page I wanted to go to. In San Francisco, this is from 2018, so it's gotten even worse, but you are basically low income if your household makes less than $117,000 a year. It's probably a lot more. It's probably closer to $130,000, $140,000 a year now officially. And this is simply because the cost of housing is so high. Here's the cheapest house I could find in San Francisco for sale, basically $600,000 for 486 square feet. And so this might buy you a really nice house in certain parts of the country, but even on a minimum wage or low income salary in San Francisco, you probably still would not be able to come up with the 20% to purchase this house. Another reason family farms have become so expensive is we have billionaires like Bill Gates, now the U.S., the largest farm land owner. So this is something that's also very unfair. Bill Gates pushes up the price of farms, and then your father or you have to pay unrealized capital gains taxes because the paper value of your farm has gone up because of people like Bill Gates, of course. If you're finding this video helpful so far, be sure to hit that subscribe and like button. Maybe share this video with a few friends who you think might benefit from it. So here's another problem. Another problem is with an unrealized capital gains tax. Let's say you buy the stock at 100, it ends up at 150 on December 31st. So you need to pay that $10 in capital gains taxes, unrealized capital gains taxes, because you haven't sold the stock. Now let's say the following year, so another year later, on December 31st, the stock is trading at $50. Now you haven't sold because you believe in the long-term prospects of this company. It's a 10-year holding or a multi-decade holding, but the stock is now trading $50 below where you bought it. You had to pay that $10 in unrealized capital gains taxes. Does the government refund you that $10 now that you no longer have a paper profit on the stock? In fact, you have a very large paper loss. Does the government refund you the $10 from the previous year? If so, this creates a lot of volatility for government budgets, as the government, whenever the stock market's down, the government actually has to come up with very large payments to people, or tax credits, which means that the revenue goes down. And so this would make the U.S. government even more dependent on the price of the stock market than it is now, and could create funding problems. I'm not sure this is true, but there is a lot of talk on Twitter that the Wyden proposed tax includes an exemption for Congress, men and women, all members of the House of Representatives, all senators and their staff would be exempt. If true, absolutely outrageous, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's true. We can see that the U.S. government is getting desperate to plug this huge spending hole, which we've talked about. Right now, there's about $3.8 trillion in tax revenue collected every year, and spending is almost double that at $7 trillion. So there's this budget deficit of $3.2 trillion that needs to be plugged, and it's currently being plugged by selling a lot of debt. A lot of people don't realize that the government's so out of control, you could confiscate 100% of the wealth of all the billionaires in the U.S., and it wouldn't last you more than a couple of years. So taxes are not really the way out of this, or wealth confiscation. The really strange part of this plan is that we have the money printers going. We talk about these almost every day on this channel, and asset prices are being inflated simply because the value of the US dollar and other fiat currencies is being depreciated by all this money printing. So you basically print money, you inflate stocks and real estate and Bitcoin to the moon, and then you tax unrealized capital gains. Maybe this is the ultimate plan, or it's the unconscious plan. And as such, it's quite bizarre, especially if you're holding something, you're just trying to maintain your wealth. You're not really trying to grow it, but you're trying to hedge it against fiat currency devaluation, and yet you're being taxed at the same time on it. So if this ever passed, and again, I don't think it's going to pass, at least not this year, but if it ever passed, this would definitely affect my plan to never sell my Bitcoin and instead to take loans against it. I would be subject to an unrealized capital gains tax, as would anyone who's been holding Bitcoin for more than a year or so. If you bought Bitcoin a year ago, everyone is in a big profit. At this point, if the tax regime in the US became this unfriendly, I think, at least for me, it'd be time to look for a more friendly tax jurisdiction, a country that actually valued its people and didn't view its people as individuals to be put in a matrix pod and to be harvested for their electricity, and basically to be treated as farm animals. El Salvador said that there's going to be no tax on Bitcoin profits for foreign investors. This is obviously a very nice place with a very nice climate, nice beaches, etc., and very you could pay for everything using Bitcoin in the country. I made a video about a year ago about 8 countries that don't tax Bitcoin gains, which you can check out. Some of this might be outdated simply because tax law is always changing, but this can give you at least a place to start. The problem with being a U.S. citizen, of course, is the U.S. exit tax if you decide to ever leave and renounce your U.S. citizenship. Because if you don't renounce your U.S. citizenship, you're taxed on worldwide income, even if you never come back to the U.S. if you're still a citizen. So what you have to do is renounce your citizenship, and then you pay what's called an exit tax, and that can be as high as 23.8%. And this would involve a very similar thing where everything gets marked to market, and you pay taxes on unrealized gains. I imagine there'll be some people who unfortunately have lost their Bitcoin in a boating accident, and this could be tragic if it happens. On the other hand, it's very difficult to pay taxes on something that you don't own anymore. If your pirate ship full of gold sinks to the bottom of the ocean, it seems unfair to me to have to pay taxes on that gold. Or you can just encourage the IRS to get their scuba diving equipment on and go down and receive their fair share of the gold. If you found this video helpful, be sure to hit that subscribe and like button. Hit the notification bell if you want to be notified when I publish my next video. And let me know your questions and comments in the comment section below. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.